This CPL offseason continues to be possibly the most interesting one we've had yet. More and more high-profile signings, both incoming and outgoing of the league, are happening basically on an almost weekly basis so far this offseason. And now with January come and gone, it's time to look at some of the biggest CPL transfers from January. So let's jump right into it with one of the first big transfers that happened in the month, an interleague transfer. Brian Wright moving from Atletico Ottawa to York United. Brian Wright was Ottawa's second top goal scorer in the league last season, scoring 7 goals in 28 league appearances, second on the team only to Ollie Bassett. Now, he leaves Ottawa and joins a York United team, which is compiling a very, very strong offense. York United has been one of the more active teams in terms of new incoming players and actually outgoing players too so far this offseason. With the addition of Brian Wright, though, York is building what could be one of the most dangerous offenses in the league. They already have Osaze de Rosario and Mo Babouli, who were both absolutely incredible last season. Had they had Babouli for the entirety of last season and not had him only join in the summer, they likely would have made the playoffs. So adding Brian Wright to a team that has already 2 very strong goal-scoring players in Babouli, who was lights out in the second half of last season, and de Rosario, who is second place in the CPL Golden Boot race, that just all of a sudden is a very, very strong offense. 3 guys who are all very highly proven in the Canadian Premier League. So this is a huge get for York, as it gives them some much needed striker depth and much needed attacking depth, and just another big option up front. Next up, we have one of the more interesting international inbound signings to the Canadian Premier League. Lorenzo Calligari is a French midfielder, a former French youth international, who came up through the PSG Academy and actually played a game in Ligue 1 with PSG back in the day. He signs with the Halifax Wanderers for this upcoming season. Now, Calligari is, as I said before, a PSG Youth Academy player who in 2016 actually made an appearance in League for the PSG first team. So technically a former PSG player going into now the Canadian Premier League with the Halifax Wanderers. That is a very interesting one off the bat. Now, obviously, Calligari didn't stick with PSG. He ended up following PSG, signing with a team in the French 3rd tier, and then signing the following season with a team that was in the French 2nd tier, which then got relegated and went down to the French 3rd tier, where he played last year. However, following the 2021-22 season, he was a free agent, unsigned, had not signed a contract until the winter, until January, where he was then picked up by the Wanderers. Now, very interesting signing by the Wanderers, a guy who's basically a complete unknown but has European experience. He's a guy who, at that level where he's played, he could come in and be an absolute monster in the Canadian Premier League, or he could just be like, fine, I guess. So, a guy who we're really not going to be able to gauge how good he is until he comes in and plays, but obviously the talent is there, so it'll be really interesting to see how this guy performs in the Canadian Premier League. Very interesting signing. I think the first PSG former player to come to the Canadian Premier League. That is exciting regardless of who it is. Sticking with guys coming over to the CPL from Europe, York United, back to York, have signed another big signing. Clement Bayiha, the former CF Montreal man and Canadian Youth International. Bayiha was a fringe rotation player for the Impact, then CF Montreal during the 2019-20 and 21 seasons, helping them win the 2019 Canadian Championship. Following the end of the 2021 season, he went to join HamKam in the Norwegian League, a top-tier team there. Didn't stick around for a ton of playtime, and now is coming back to Canada to the CPL with York. After signing Lassana Faye in the January window, a guy who's traditionally a left back, they now get Clement Bayiha, a guy who's traditionally a right back at York, and those are 2 high-quality fullbacks for the Canadian Premier League. Always in the CPL, you can get a guy who had Major League Soccer experience. They're a big signing, and Clement Bayiha, coming in, he has the opportunity to be one of, if not the best right back in the Canadian Premier League. So big signing for York as they continue the big signings. Honestly, York right now is my off-season champion in the CPL so far. They have made some huge moves this season. They're my most improved team as of yet. And Bayiha is just another piece to the puzzle, another guy who he's a guy who you know is going to be pretty solid in the Canadian Premier League. He was solid at Montreal. He wasn't like a set in the starting 11 every single time, but he was a solid player in Montreal in Major League Soccer, so he should come in and be pretty damn good in the Canadian Premier League. Next up, we have a transfer I think everyone knew was happening. Marco Bustos finally signs officially with IFK Värnamo in the Swedish top division. This one had been rumored since December. I talked about it a bit in my November-December CPL transfers recap video. Bustos, we already knew he was leaving Pacific, so I'm not going to talk about him leaving Pacific aspect of this, but going to the Swedish top division, this is a big move for Marco Bustos. Very happy that he was able to turn a couple of very, very good seasons in the Canadian Premier League into an opportunity to go play in Europe, and not just in like a social league in Europe. The Swedish league is decent in Europe. Teams from there regularly able to make it to the Champions League group stage. Best of luck to Bustos in Sweden, but as far as CPL to Europe transfers go, this one to Sweden is one of the biggest ones we have seen. The building of Vancouver FC continues with Rocco Romeo, the former Valor center back and former TFC Academy center back, joins Vancouver FC ahead of their first season. Now, a fun part of Rocco Romeo trivia is Romeo never actually made an appearance for the Toronto FC first team, which, given how much he was talked about in those circles, is kind of shocking. Romeo was a center back prospect for TFC for years, played a lot of times for TFC2, got loaned out from TFC a couple of times, got loaned out to the CPL from TFC in 2021, but he was always kind of in the conversation as soon he will get his start at TFC, and I guess I kind of just had in my head that like he definitely would have had to have played a Canadian Championship game or something like that for TFC, like off the bench or something, but he apparently never did. So, well, not entirely relevant, I kind of wanted to mention that because it is surprising that he never actually played for Toronto FC, especially given how much his name was thrown around. Maybe it's because his name's Rocco Romeo, very exciting name, very notable name. But Rocco Romeo, very, very solid center back in his 2 seasons in the Canadian Premier League. And so Valor losing him is a massive loss on their back end. Vancouver FC signing him, that is a big, big get for Vancouver FC trying to be competitive in their first season. He's not going to be challenging for Defender of the Year, but Romeo definitely is a solid center back in the Canadian Premier League and just is another sign that Vancouver FC are not messing around with assembling their roster for their first season. Another former MLS guy, Shamit Shome, has signed with Cavalry FC. Shome, in Edmonton native, was an FC Edmonton player in the NASL days back in 2016. 2017 to 2020, he was with the Montreal Impact in MLS, actually was slowly building up, getting more and more play time. In 2017, he had 1 appearance. In 2018, he had 5. In 2019, Shamit Shome was a regular on the Montreal Impact, and it was a big name. People were talking about him being in the conversation to make the Canadian national team regularly at that point. Then in 2020, his playtime went down. 2021, he's back with FC Edmonton, sticks around with FC Edmonton in 2022 as the captain, and really the only name besides maybe Warszewski on that team in 2022. And now with the folding of FC Edmonton, unfortunately, he has to leave Edmonton, and it seems that he's going to the next closest city with Cavalry FC. Now, Shome's one of those guys where, based off of what he did in Major League Soccer, especially in 2019, you would think that he would be a lights-out player in the Canadian Premier League, but so far in his 2 seasons in the CPL, he hasn't really been that. In fact, if it was just those CPL seasons in a nutshell, he wouldn't even be on this list that I'm compiling of big transfers. But it's because of that MLS history, that Impact history, that I think he definitely is a big name in this league. Now, if he can go back, regain that 2019 form he had with the Impact and bring it now to Cavalry, because especially with Edmonton, he never really had a fair shot because the team around him wasn't as quality. With Cavalry, he's going to be on a better squad, on a higher quality squad, so the players around him are going to be better. Maybe that'll allow Shamit Shome to be more of what we expected Shamit Shome to be in the Canadian Premier League. He definitely is a very solid midfielder and a very solid get for cavalry, a very solid guy that I don't think anyone in the CPL would be upset to have in their midfield. But the question, I guess, is can he turn around to like okay, I guess, seasons in Edmonton and go become the CPL star that he was touted to be with cavalry? Daniel Krutzen, the Forge FC player, notably spent almost all of last season injured, came back just in time for the CPL finals, and then Forge added the best defender in the league to that team before and went on to win the CPL championship, largely in part of the fact that Krutzen came back in time for those finals. Krutzen has been a member of Forge since the first season in 2019. He has been the rock on the back end the whole way through. Consistently one of, if not the best defender in the Canadian Premier League, game in, game out. Daniel Krutzen just has been a monster on the back end for Forge, and everyone knows Forge with Krutzen versus Forge without Krutzen are two completely different monsters. He moves to Phoenix Rising in the USL Championship. Again, I know people don't like that the USL Championship is a bit of a step up from the CPL, but it is a bit of a step up from the CPL. There's more money in that league. So Krutzen definitely, hopefully getting a pay raise as he goes. They are well deserved. The injury problems last season probably definitely did limit how far upward his trajectory could go, but I think it was obvious that A, Forge showed last season that they didn't really need Krutzen. Adding Krutzen to Forge just kind of made them insane. And B, I think it's obvious since like the 2021 season that as far as defenders go, Krutzen was a little too good for the Canadian Premier League. So he goes to the USL Championship. I feel like for him that is a perfect league for him to go and like be a solid defender in still, but like not be gonna be the defender of the year if he doesn't get hurt sort of situation. So good move for Krutzen. I really like it. Hopefully he can not be injured all season and gets like a steady, significant play time in the USL Championship, because I think if he does that, we could very easily see him in Major League Soccer in a year or two. And the final transfer from January I want to talk about is one that I did not think I was going to be talking about. Ballou Tabla. What a story already at just 23 years old. The guy who we thought was Alphonso Davies before Alphonso Davies. Montreal Impact Academy prospect, plays at the age of 17 in Major League Soccer, gets transferred at 18 to Barcelona. Plays for Barcelona's B team and then never quite makes it, falls off, gets sent back to Major League Soccer, back to CF Montreal, falls out of favor there and ends up in the Canadian Premier League, revives his career in a season of Atletico Ottawa, scores the goal of the season, and a goal that I think was robbed of a Puskas nominee, was a crucial part of Ottawa making it to the CPL finals, was their second best player all season behind Oli Bassett, and now he has turned that into a move back to Europe. It is just with Manisa FK in the Turkish second division, so it is just a Turkish second division, but he is back in Europe, and I never thought that that would be the case. I thought maybe Ballou Tabla could turn it around in the CPL, go back, maybe back into CF Montreal if he turned it around, and then maybe, who knows, by then he'll probably be too old to go back. And like, yeah, Turkish second division is not anywhere close to Major League Soccer in terms of level. He's back in Europe. He's back in a position now where he could showcase himself, get to the Turkish top flight, go further off in Europe. Very, very exciting and interesting move for Ballou Tabla, but it's just absolutely fantastic that he was able to get himself back on the radar for teams outside of Canada with his performance in the CPL in 2022. I really hope he can continue to build on the resurgence he had with Ottawa this last season, because Ballou Tabla is the guy where all the talent is there, and he's still just 23, even though he went to Europe once and had it implode and fell all the way back down to the CPL. He's still just 23. There still is time for him to go and build up, and Barcelona is not going to happen, but some solid career in Europe definitely still could. But it makes me so happy that he was able to come back, use the CPL, which didn't exist when he was a teenager. It was MLS or nothing when he was a teenager. He was able to use the CPL to regain his image and now go back to Europe, albeit at a low division, but he still made it back. So happy for him, and I really, really hope that he can continue to build on this and just go up the ranks in Europe, because, as I said, the talent is all there, and it sounds like the mental is finally catching up. Keep an eye on Ballou Tabla because he definitely could build it back. So that does it for the biggest CPL transfers of January. Some big moves happening across the Canadian Premier League. A lot of teams, though, still need to do a lot of roster filling out to do. Vancouver still needs to do a bunch. Ottawa needs to replace a couple of these guys that are gone. Forge has not really done anything in terms of bringing guys in. So a lot of interesting plot lines still to happen, but already we've seen some big things this CPL offseason. Halifax making moves, York making a lot of moves, some high-profile guys going abroad. A lot of interesting stuff has happened so far. We still have 2 more months of off-season in the Canadian Premier League for a lot of more moves to happen. So keep an eye out. It should get interesting. So that does it for this video. As always, if you'd like to hit like, if you want to see more of my stuff, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, link is down below in the description, and I will see you next time.